Hi, everyone. Hope you're able to see us and hear us. This is Anvita. I'm from the IIT Bombay Alumni Association Mumbai chapter. And I have a very special guest today with me, Mr. Girish Vaidya, who's a veteran in the startup ecosystem. He spent decades with large organizations incubating a bunch of startups, and he is here to share a bunch of mantras on successful entrepreneurship, and very excited to put this together and have him on today. Thank you so much, Mr. Girish, for spending the time. We are really delighted to have you on.
Thanks very much, Anvita. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to be addressing the distinguished alumni of IIT Bombay. Thanks a lot for giving me this slot.
That's absolutely very delighted to have you. Like I shared, so I'll start with a quick two-liner about myself, and I'll share a relatively larger bio about Mr. Girish before we dive right into the topic. So I am a 2014 IIT Bombay alum, and I have been working in management consulting and venture investing for the last few years. And very recently, I have been working with a health tech startup in India that's actually bridging gaps for new and young families in India. We call Baby Chakra. That's what I've been building for the last few years. So startup and entrepreneurship is a very close and dear to heart topic. So when we had Mr. Girish and the topic we wanted to discuss on was on entrepreneurship, I was personally very excited. And I'll now take this time to very briefly give an introduction about Mr. Girish for the few of you who don't know. Mr. Girish is a graduate of University of Bombay. In first class, he graduated in 1973. Post that, he joined IIM Calcutta to finish his post-graduation. And after completing the management studies from IIM Calcutta in 1975, Mr. Girish was recruited by erstwhile Grindlays Bank in June 1975. He's had a great career with the bank for 24 years. And he's worked in all the areas in the bank, like operations, credit, account management, technology, strategic planning, etc. He worked in different locations in India as well and in abroad, in London, in Singapore, in Melbourne. Post that, he joined Infosys in 1999 as head of banking software product, then called Banks 2000, which was relaunched as Finacle by him. Finacle is now used by many banks globally, apart from enjoying a dominant position in India. He moved to head Infosys Leadership Institute in 2006, and after moving out of Infosys in 2010, he has advised a bunch of startups and small companies on various issues. Thanks again, Mr. Girish. We are really delighted to have you on. We know from your experience, there will be a bunch of things. So many of us entrepreneurs, aspiring ones, will be keen to learn on. So I want to jump right in and address the theme of the topic today. We want to talk about how you're seeing the entrepreneurship ecosystem evolve from the time you've seen startups from now. Have you seen the appetite to start really grow? And do you see any particular factors contributing to that?
Thanks a lot, Anvita, for a lovely introduction. Yeah, I think that's a tremendously exciting, absolutely exciting development in India. And it's bodes well for India as a country, India as a nation. What has happened is that today, in the 50s when we were growing up, or even 60s, 70s, India was still desperately poor. There was no capital. Now, for the first time, middle class has acquired some capital. There are many houses or many homes are double income with perhaps no more than one or two kids. Most of them do not have to bear the burden of supporting their parents. So they have the choices. The job opportunities have grown tremendously in the last few years, especially after 1990. So dropping a job and leaving a job and then rejoining is a possibility which simply didn't exist then. So there is a huge mindset change, and what is absolutely exciting is that people from middle class, even people like you, are jumping right in to take up the entrepreneurship journey, which we hardly ever saw in the past. So it's a fantastic thing, and I think those things are going to probably. The other important part is that there are actually now successful role models. We did not have middle class people making it good in the past, but today we have the Murthy's and a number of them, the Bansals of Flipkart, and so many of them. that you can actually look to them and say, hey, if he could make it, so could I. And that's a big change, I think. Yeah.
That makes so much sense, and thanks for sharing that. That's a great segue for us to know a little bit about your time, Mr. Girish, at Infosys. Can you share a bit of your time there, some of your credentials you'd love to share with folks who are listening to us?
Yeah, sure. I think in the last 10 years, I've worked with a number of startups on a pro bono capacity most of the time, of people who came to me for various issues, but effectively I was advising them on all the aspects. And often I realized that the problem or the challenge they came to me with and the real problem or challenge they were facing were two different things. And often in during the discussion or brainstorming, I was able to convince them that the real issue was not X as they perceived it to be, but it was Y, and we had to address Y, and then X will take care of itself. So that's one part of the experience. Then during my Infosys Leadership Institute stint, we tried to develop entrepreneurs because Infosys itself was an entrepreneur-driven company, and somehow it was felt by the directors quite rightly that entrepreneurship was not alive any longer. So we felt that we needed to develop entrepreneurship in Infosys, and some plan was to put together. So I have been part of that journey, and I can share the learnings that I had from that journey maybe towards the end of the discussion. Prior to that, in banking, of course, as a lending banker, I've seen a lot of businessmen and some of the entrepreneurs, some businessmen who were entrepreneurs. So a little bit of understanding of how the financing part works and where they go wrong and so on. Yeah. So that's what we have put together, and a little bit of theoretical study of the whole phenomenon of entrepreneurship. Yes.
That's beautiful to hear. So I think the first question then, when we talk about entrepreneurship or startups, is what the idea really is. Is there a problem to really solve? And if you and I think there is one, is there a way to validate that? So how would you suggest, Mr. Girish, current aspiring entrepreneurs to approach the concept of an idea and validating that?
Excellent question, Anvita, because it all begins with the idea, right? I mean, idea is what the starting point is. And so let's look at the idea. The idea is really to solve an issue, and it kind of has to fall into one of the three buckets, but the buckets are not mutually exclusive. Some of the ideas can fall into more than one bucket. So let's look at these three buckets. Now, this is a very rough and ready conceptualization. We could argue that there are more, and perhaps there are, but here is my view. The idea has to be something which will either produce a better quality or lower cost or a combination of both. So if there is a product or service or whatever it is, if you have a suggestion, if you have a way of offering a better quality at a lower cost, then you are a winner in that sense. Second bucket would be addressing a pain point and providing additional convenience. So addressing a pain point or providing additional convenience. I think the best examples would be Ola or OYO. In Ola, what is the model? Now, admittedly, it is something which is following the Uber model, but even if you take the original Uber model, basically said the demand and supply are at two different places. Demand cannot connect to supply, supply cannot connect to demand. So through technology, we connect demand and supply, and we have a business going. Fantastic idea. It has really taken off in a big way. Ola, which is a sort of a copy, if I may use the word copy in a very positive sense, not in a negative sense. It was hugely successful, and in fact, it is giving tough competition to Uber. I think Ola market share may have been higher. Same thing with OYO company. Basically, it said the budget hotels is something which is below the radar of most of the travel portals. So, hey, let me go in there and standardize the offering and get people to be able to access that. It was again a win-win. Of course, now there are problems with the commissions and all that. I understand that, but I'm looking at a conceptual stage. The conceptually, it is actually reducing this. And the third one, in my opinion, is superior technical features like faster speed, higher security, ease of operation, or superior design features. I think the Ready example that comes to my mind is Apple. Absolutely superior design features, very reliable in terms of much more reliable than Windows was. Now Windows has also become reliable. Ease of operation, point and click started with them. Today, of course, Windows offers. So Windows has covered the gap. But if you really see originally, those were the offerings which made a huge difference to uh, Apple's. And Apple therefore could actually charge a premium and get away with it. And even now, people who are Apple product users uh, swear by Apple. So these would be the three areas where I would say that your product idea should fall. Now this is where you started with the idea. First, I'm saying that try to see which bucket it fits into. Okay. Now there is a fourth bucket which I have not mentioned. There is a fourth bucket which is kind of almost a visionary type of bucket where you say that this is what the people are going to need in future, and I will start providing it. Frankly, I couldn't think of too many examples of that where something absolutely visionary came up. Maybe Google, but maybe not, because Google also started as a search engine and then it expanded. Nobody thought of Google expanding into things like maps and stuff like that. If you see in 1997, all that these two guys did was a search engine. They wanted an optimized search engine, and that led to one thing, led to another. So one of the things that you can look at, one of the lessons to learn is that idea need not be a complete idea at the beginning. Uh, Google is a very good example. It did not begin as the final product that we see today. I would even dare say that the entire IT industry in India is not what is today, was not envisaged to be what is today. And in the bank, I was heading the technology function, and I have dealt with the IT vendors from the other side, though not with Infosys. And their vision was very limited. But certainly the whole world changed, and we were able to dance on the world this. So the idea need not be the big picture that it ends up in. You start off, and then it can expand with luck and so on and so forth. Yeah, so I would say that these are the three basic buckets that you should look into. The fourth one is there, totally visionary approach, but can't think of very many examples, frankly.
This is great, and I think for all entrepreneurs out there, I think a beautiful framework to fit in these three or the fourth bucket as well. Where do you see your idea really fit in? And if it doesn't fit in any of them, I think that's an indication to reevaluate, saying, "Hey, we need to figure out an idea which is something that can be a viable business." So thanks for sharing that. So a follow up on that, and say for instance, there is an idea that we are thinking about. How do we go about validating how large is it? Is there a way to back it up with with solid data, saying this is how large the total addressable market, the TAM, as it's most well recognized as, or even gut feelings, or a bottom up calculation for calculating the addressable market helps as well. So could you throw some more light on validating the idea once we
Excellent,
have?
excellent. Because the idea that you think of is something like is always becomes very precious to you. Time comes when any attack, any criticism on the idea is seen as a criticism on the person himself, and so the idea and the person often merge. And that's for an entrepreneur. Therefore, the more he thinks of that idea, the more convinced he becomes. And the more other people say, hey, but it's not going to work, the more he writes them off saying, you guys don't know a thing about what my views are and so on. Now, he may be right, but I think it will help your chances if you basically look at idea from three angles. That idea could be justified on the basis of hard data. Okay, that very good example of that is Ola or even Flipkart. Amazon has worked in US, just started selling books. Flipkart just copied it, started selling books. But when I say just copied it, I mean India had a huge problem of supply chain and so on. So it's not, the journey was very hard. Let me not sort of trivialize it. But the fact remains that the idea itself, there was hard data. So you can go on the basis of hard data, like it has worked here or there, and therefore it will work. Or there is actually a pain point here, and if I do it, it will work. There is this famous company called Redbus, which provides bus bookings, online. Uh, good idea, I thought, because bus bookings are always a little dicey. They're run by private companies in many states. So that is a hard data thing. There's sometimes a soft data, like you know that this will work, but you're not absolutely sure. But there is some data to back it, though it cannot be quantified. It's not quantifiable, but it is a soft data kind of a thing. And there is a gut feel sort of thing that comes up where it is not really hard data, soft data, but your hardcore gut feel feels that it's going to work. But I think at some stage you need to really think back and see this as a as a whether it's actually going to work, and see whether there's hard data supporting it. Let me give you an example. One of the companies I came across had had worked out a Hindi version of Scrabble. So Hindi words could be put together, a Hindi version of Scrabble. And they had actually worked through, they were in fact IIT graduates. They had worked through very hard and very innovatively. But my question to them was, but who's going to buy this? And they said, no, 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 what this is how. I said, look, everybody's aspiration is to go to an English medium school. So why would, and even the father wants or the mother wants the kids to learn English words and not Hindi words, even if they are Hindi speaking. That's the reality of India. So who's going to buy it? They didn't quite listen. Eventually, they were able to sell it to Hindi speaking schools, government schools. But government schools means, payment will not come on time. If it is sanctioned, there's corruption and, all that. So ultimately, they had to give up. So here was a good example. They actually did brilliant work in cracking a problem, innovative, because there is no Hindi Scrabble or Marathi Scrabble, or as far as I know, because of the peculiarity of the language. But in reality, they were solving a problem which, they're coming out with a solution when there was really no problem. So that it would have helped them. They went on the gut feel that it works in English, why not in Hindi? That was the gut feel. But at some stage, they should have sat back and say, hey, who's going to buy it? They had to eventually, I think, wind up, as far as I know. So those are the kind of things. So at some stage, and one more point I would like to just make very quickly, Anita, that it is important that you keep on write that down. It doesn't matter if you say there's no hard data, there's no soft data, there's only my gut feel. But say after every year, 1 year, 6 months, whenever, you should go back and really check whether your learning after you started the journey fits in with what you originally assumed. Point number one. Point number two, while you write this down, you have to be absolutely honest, absolutely honest. Don't try to, because you'll be cheating yourself if you say that there is hard data when there is none. So that's another thing that one of the things again I want to like to make is that entrepreneurship is all about balancing apparently contradictory impulses in human mind. So there is the impulse of being visionary, doing something exciting, and there is the other thing which is analytical, data based, and so on. It's important to balance the two. It is important not to get carried away. Should avoid paralysis by analysis, too much of analysis. And if you start thinking that the world is going to come to an end or the sky is going to fall, then you're not going to go anywhere. So I think it's important to balance, and that's I think the trickiest part in the entrepreneurship journey. How do you balance these apparently contradictory impulses? Yeah.
That's very well put, Mr. Girish, because entrepreneurship does feel like actually nurturing a baby. It's your own. You're very, very emotionally vested in it.
Very
So
well
I
put.
think you make a brilliant point
Very
that
well
it's
put.
important to kind of have those boundaries in and have a very conscious call and direction on where's the business really moving. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I want to touch on another important aspect of starting off is how important are co-founders or partners in general in this entire journey. What tips would you have for folks on this aspect of finding the right co-founder or finding the right partners for even financing if they're looking at?
Excellent. So I'll cover both of them. The founders is again a very important thing. Now, founders are something that happens by a process, a natural process. You don't just two friends get together and then they say they get along with each other, which is great. You start with that. But if you're the sole founder, then look at skills that you would need to succeed. Now, the skills that you need to succeed when the company is young or is just about starting to are different from when the company becomes 50 crore, 100 crore company. So you need to get that right. And the mantra to apply there is to make sure that you have mutually exclusive but collectively exhaustive set of skills. What I mean is that five founders or five key people coming together, all gurus in technology, is probably not going to succeed because each one is going to just focus on technology. You probably need technology, you need marketing, you need somebody who can understand where the technology can be used in the so how it can be marketed and so on. So you need different kinds of skills, and just having too many skills of one type doesn't help. The other important part I would like to mention is that at some stage you will also need to look at what their value systems are. That is also important because especially when you are a young company, the values matter a lot, and people get along if the value systems are similar. I have seen a couple of examples which I would like to quote, where I have seen very interesting things at work, where people were very objective about the skill sets. I was introduced to a company. I'm not mentioning names purely because those companies, I mean, that I know that company has changed its name, but nevertheless, I don't want to mention the name. But it was a company into banking analytics, and I was invited to help them out with a few, some guidance and so on. And I went and met the CEO, and I just assumed that CEO was one of the founders. And then I met the team, and there were two people, you know. And then after a few meetings, I was told that CEO is not the founder. In fact, it is two of the founders who were heading two units, two sort of verticals or whatever. The units in the one was operations, the another was HR or something. Uh, and I was very surprised. And they reported into the founder, they reported into the CEO, and both of them sat on the board, and he reported back to them on the board. So I said, hang on here, how is it ever going to work? But they were all three of them were friends, okay, from college, number one. Number two, the CEO was actually quite a seasoned campaigner from Cognizant. He had spent many years there and was a good chap, very impressive chap. So the two got together and said, look, we don't have the capacity to become CEO. Let's invite this guy to become the CEO. And it worked. I mean, against all logic, it worked. Let me give another example. Again, I'm not mentioning the name because that company still exists. It's in the area of outsourced financial analysis. So they do analysis for Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and all that sort of people for various markets. You want to know what was the Japanese electricity market, they will do the analysis for you, that kind of a company. Now, they had four founders. One of them had moved out. Three founders, I think maybe one or two or all of them, were Indians but American citizens, something like that. Again, they got together and said, we need a professional CEO. They got a professional CEO, somebody I knew from my banking days. And, I mean, he's an extremely bright guy, the CEO, but not emotionally great. Emotional intelligence is not very high. And sure enough, that did not work. So these kind of experiments are interesting. But to make them work, there has to be a lot of understanding. But yeah, so the point I was basically making was that skill set. Here, they were objective enough to realize that their skill set was not to become the CEO. So they got somebody else and had no problems in reporting. Awkwardness because they were reporting to him, who in turn was reporting to them, manner of speaking. So it's a bit of a circular thing. Shall I get on to the capital, or is that something which you want to ask another question?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry to cut you, but we have a few questions, and I think they're relevant to address
Sure.
before we move on to the financing aspect. So we have Mr. Anirudh actually asking that once the ideas are born, what should be the first steps to develop a plan?
Well, I think you should develop a business plan. Yeah. How will that idea work in practice? What is that likely market? I mean, it's like peeling an onion, okay? In the sense that initially it will be a very broad level plan, and then slowly you should refine it to a point where it kind of you get some kind of broad parameters. The cost involved, and that leads me to capital. So at the moment, I will not immediately bring that up. But the most important thing is where are you going to get the capital from, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think the ideas, therefore, to answer the question briefly, is take the ideas to the business plan, put it down on a piece of paper. First, you do the validation of the idea, the hard, soft, and thing. Secondly, work out where this idea is going to play. There are two basically areas: B2B, business to business, or business to consumer. Now, which space is it going to play in? and then try to validate the idea. Once the idea is validated to the extent possible, and you decide to still go ahead with it, then I think first cut business plan is a must, because that tells you all about where you are probably headed. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have another one from Mr. Ajay, who's actually
Hmm.
curious to know where does an entrepreneur look for a revenue model?
Oh, well, I think that's the most important question. So I think it is from the market that he's addressing, really, because they are the guys who are going to pay. Now, the market and the customer has to be defined. As you know, in Google sort of system, you and I are the customers, because we make choices on Google, and then therefore we become the, sorry, we are not the customers, we are the product. I take back my words. We are the product, and that product is offered to the advertisers, who can then say XYZ of such age, of such health conditions, living in Bangalore or whatever, and they can have a much more targeted. You know the game. All of you know the game better than I do. So yeah, so the revenue model could be from advertising, but before you come to the revenue model, identify the product and the consumer of the product. Now, as I said, Google, uh, counterintuitively, the product is the free user, and any sort of app or any portal which allows you some information free is really using you as the product. You become the product inevitably in some kind of a this scenario. So yeah, the first is know the product or the service that you're offering, and then who is going to pay. Who's going to pay? It may not be the person who's using it. That's the point I'm trying to make. Yeah.
Makes sense. Thanks for sharing. And we have one more before we can move to the
Sure. Sure.
investor section of our conversation. Here we have Miss Nikita, who's curious to know about your Grindlays bank experience. I think we didn't get a chance to touch upon that a bit, and we see a few folks curious. So if you can shed some light about your experience there.
Yeah, okay. So very briefly, I joined the bank in '75. It was called Grindlays Bank. It was originally a British bank, very much a colonial heritage. I didn't. That was not my first choice, but because I had rejected an offer, I had no option but to join. But I had a great time there. So very varied experience, very varied experience. Different countries, different systems, including handling a scam related issue. I mean, in 1992, there was this major scam called Arshad Mehta scam. And my bank got stuck for 506 crores there in handling what are called a third party checks. That's a very technical thing, but I was asked to sort of oversee that. And so that time I worked with the top lawyers. Our legal team was led by the present Attorney General of India, Mr. K. K. Venugopal, and all the top lawyers were there. And our position was led by equally distinguished lawyer and ex Attorney General of India, K. Parasharan. I just found that he's in his 90s, still going strong. He appeared for Lord Ram as in the case for Supreme Court in the present Babri Masjid case. So apparently, in the Indian law, the deity can also become a party to the dispute. So he was arguing Lord Ram's case. So and I have also been cross-examined by him. So that's another distinction I would like to claim. I just happened. I mean, it's just good luck. It's no credit to my capabilities or whatever. It just happened. So yeah. So I've had a lot of banking. Banking, there lots of experience. I will take too much time if I say about it, because you deal with people and you see all kinds of people. The only thing, if I had to sum up, I've met a lot of people with a lot of wealth, and many of them were not very nice people. So very painful in terms of, because I think there is something that happens when people acquire a lot of wealth. Their mind goes for a toss and they start imagining they're very powerful. But not all. Like my Infosys founders had wealth and were very, very decent people, extremely decent people. So that's not true. But I have come across some not so nice wealthy people. But that's the bank's job: look after the wealthy people on a
Yeah,
small salary,
thanks.
if I may add.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. And sorry, but we have a few more questions. So if it's okay, we can address
Yeah, sure.
them
Tell me. Yeah, go ahead. I'm
uh,
happy to.
real time as well. Awesome. Awesome. So we have who's asking that any comments on balancing act between getting a rockstar team early member versus someone fresh out of college, especially in early days.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the question is the rock star types are sometimes extremely maintenance heavy people. Just managing them and managing their ego can take half your energy. So just make sure that the rock star is actually rock star in performance and not rock star in throwing tantrums or whatever. So I think it comes back to the skill set. What is the skill set that you need? If you need a very high class driver who has participated in car races, then you go for one type of person. But you just need a driver to take you to the office and back, then you go for a different type of person. So it's a question of what skill sets you need at that stage and who fits those skill sets. I have already given examples where the founders actually invited somebody from outside to become the CEO. So that sort of models can work. Not easy to work, but I've seen it work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very well put. Thanks for sharing. We have another listener, Mr. Jatin, who wants to know growth versus revenue. What's more important for an entrepreneur?
That's a $1 million question. I think it would depend on each type of business you have. Like in many businesses, they make losses. Amazon for famously used to make losses for years together. So they make losses and their valuation keeps on rising. I mean, it does not make sense to the ordinary person. But now this is the bet on the future. What people are saying is that in 10 years, 15 years, the old style shopping that people like in my generation did, or maybe even partly your generation have done, which is to go to the mall, have a good evening and make some purchases and do this and that, is going to go out. People will buy at 10:30 in the night, just see on this and click and make purchases at or 7 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning. So as and when they want it, sitting in Dubai, US or wherever. So that is the new model which will come. And in those models, the problem is there is only one winner. I mean, it's not like other companies didn't try what Amazon is doing, but none of them came to anywhere at all. So that's the problem. So I think it would depend on your capital that you have raised, and it would depend on where the market or the people who are funding you see the business. If they see the business as capturing the market share, then revenue becomes important. Growth and revenue to me is very similar. But if it is no boss, you have to make money as you go along because your market is limited. Like the banking analytics, that example I gave, they had to make money because they could not really claim that they will have all banks using this analytics. It was very specific to India. They could have taken it. They did take it to other countries, but it's not going to have that kind of huge growth like Flipkart showed or Amazon has shown. Yeah, so I think it will depend on your space, B2B or B2C. This kind of exponential growth is really possible in B2C, not really possible in B2B to the same extent. Yeah. Okay.
Fair. There's another question from Mr. Prasanna, who's sharing that ideas in businesses don't work right away. So how much time should you give for an idea, and when do you decide that it's time to shut it down?
I think that's also a great question, and it's a very tricky question to answer. When does your determination become your bullheadedness or whatever? I think I can't give a general answer, honestly, Prasanna. I really can't. The answer has to be found by every person. Partly it will depend on the capital, but I think this is where a mentor might help. A good mentor can guide you because you need somebody to bounce your ideas off. So if a good mentor you can have, he can help you with coming to a conclusion and giving you. Now he should be a very balanced and experienced guy. So because otherwise he'll either mislead you by giving a very positive view or give a very negative view. So get a knowledgeable person who kind of understands the space, kind of understands the business, kind of understands what you're trying to do, and more importantly, cares for you. I think there has to be some personal connection, not too much because that can also distort the objectivity. So no general answer is possible in my opinion. You will have to go by case, and a good mentor or a good couple of mentors will help.
Makes sense, and thanks for sharing. And I think, and we have just one more question, but I figured that was an interesting segue to dive into partners, the mentor discussion we were having, but I think we should address one of the questions by Mr. Anil, who's just asking that how should an entrepreneur raise a bank loan for a business without hard assets, such as, say, a training institution?
Yeah, so the banks are basically, let's understand this thing, because people often blame banks. But I've been a banker myself, and we were told when I joined the bank that our primary responsibility has to be towards the depositors, because they trust us with the money, and therefore banks, quite rightly, in my opinion, tend to be conservative. It's a asset based lending business. Okay, they are not in the business of lending for ideas, lending for in an unsecured way. That kind of risk they are not supposed to take. Why are they are not supposed to take? Because they have not told depositors that we will take that risk. Are you with me? I mean, they cannot take unilaterally. Their promise to depositors is we shall be
Yep.
careful with your money and sort of deploy it in a conservative way. So nobody expects their capital to sort of multiply in a bank. Okay, so security is a must. But my two answers would be you should explore any government schemes. Now, government schemes come with a lot of burdens, paperwork, this, that, and the other. But there are government schemes where such things could get either against a government guarantee, in which case the bank will happily give you the loan, or against the government itself will have like MIDC kind of thing, or MSFC, or whatever, Maharashtra State Finance Corporation. They have something like that in Karnataka. They give an outright grant of something, which is just a grant or maybe repayable in very easy installments. So look at that as the first option. Build up some assets which you can then lend to bank. But these kind of ideas are best funded by risk capital, which is venture capital, in my opinion, because they are best equipped to take this kind of risks. And they can also, I mean, because it's a segue into the capital, so you'll have to look at capital, because this is one area that I would just like to mention, is one of those areas where people get it wrong, because to get capital at the right time is very important. If you see all successful startups, they have been very good, lucky, or brilliant in sourcing the capital at the right time. Whether they sourced it on the right terms, I would not know. You could argue that they gave up too much or they didn't give up too much. But it's a tricky business, and if you're starting with an idea, and basically in the new economy, I'm not talking of the old economy. The old economy, you can still get the bank loan because you will have land and you will have some machinery. But you need land. Land is expensive. So that's a different ball game altogether. But a typical middle class entrepreneur, IT or IT related these businesses are the best way forward. And they are best funded by angel funding and venture capital funding and so on and so forth. That's a huge topic. So I cannot cover it at this stage, but it's and therefore raising it at the right time is important. Sometimes people just become bullheaded, and the fact is that they just sometimes look upon the investor as just somebody who just walks in with the money and walks away with some portion of the company. That he does, sure, but if you choose a right investor, then they can actually add a lot of value. And there are now investors which are adding value in terms of providing you contacts, providing you legal support, and many other areas. And some of them are have been successful entrepreneurs themselves, so they will be able to actually provide some guidance. So getting the right money at the right price from the right investor, too many right things, but if you get all that right, then I think that's a big hurdle to cross, but something that you should focus on, because at some stage this becomes many companies fail because they don't get this part right.
Yeah, that's very well put. There's one more question from
What sort of activities
be
need to be
conducted in
conducted?
engineering colleges for motivating students to become an entrepreneur?
Well, I think courses on entrepreneurship could be of help. I think that is definitely. I'm not sure what all engineering colleges cover, but going by life, I mean, when I did my engineering or even my MBA for that matter, there was hardly any focus on soft skills. Like I graduated with an MBA, but didn't quite know how to negotiate, right? So maybe teaching simple things like negotiating skills, influencing skills. How do I influence people? Why do people get influenced? I mean, these are really practical day-to-day situations that everybody faces, but an entrepreneur faces even more than others do, right? So that is what is. So I think those kind of courses, development of people rather than just stuffing their heads with technical knowledge, because I mean, all of you are graduates and working, and that what you learn is something very small part of that you actually use, right? But it is these other skills which you probably need more. I mean, there are two types of models. One is just in case and just in time. I think our university education is just in case you join that company. So with a university degree, an IIT graduate can get into management consulting, can do anything. So that's great at a particular level. But I'm not sure today's graduates are equipped to handle these kind of situations, which are probably more relevant in any environment, but more so in the entrepreneurial environment. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's a good segue for us to talk a little bit about, say, the soft skills. I think now that we spoke about the idea, the validation, who to partner with, how to raise funds, how to think about financing and business model. I think the softer element of what is it that is expected out of you as a founder? How do you manage the team well? How do you set the culture right? How would you suggest or advise entrepreneurs to approach the softer skills of leadership as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, excellent question. See, that is why I say entrepreneurship or being an entrepreneur is a hell of a challenging job. I mean, we look upon many other jobs as great, maybe top consulting firms like you were in BCG or McKinsey's or whatever, and they have challenging jobs. I don't deny them, but the fact remains that an entrepreneur often has to balance out various, what shall I say, contradictory uh, impulses. But the main thing for the entrepreneur is that he has to remember that he's the leader. And being the leader, what it means is his needs come last. It's really that, and that leadership makes a huge difference. It impresses people. It sends them a message. Let me just give one example. Once we were taking Mr. Murthy to meet somebody in Delhi, and there were four of us. The local guy, who was the junior most, he was more like a peon. He was accompanying us to take us to the place where the meeting was taking place because we didn't know the place. There was my sales manager for India. There was I, head of Finacle, and there was Mr. Murthy. We had called for two cars. When we came down to get into the cars, Mr. Murthy said, "But there are four of us." No, there were the usual sedan type of cars. Okay, so where four people can sit with a little people tight cinch at the back, or two cars, in which case you sit aram se two at the back in two cars. So I said, yeah, two. He said, why do we need the second car? Four of us will go in one car. Now, just think that he is the senior most, and what is the most comfortable seat in a modern car? Is next to the driver, right? Because you're on your own, you're sitting. So I told my sales manager, who was deferentially standing a little away from us, I just walked up to him and told them that you let the car go. They said, no, but there'll be a little crowd and crushing. And no, he said, no, so let's do it. And we started walking back to get into the first car, single car. Now, where would you expect Mr. Murthy to sit? We were all set to request him to sit right in the front. But he had gone and sat down right in the middle of the back seat. Now, that is the worst seat, right? to get. So if he sits in the middle of the back seat, then I got on one side, the sales manager got on the other side, and the peon, who was the junior most, got the best seat. So I think there was a message being given that it's inconvenience, but as a leader, I take the inconvenience. It was a message to me and my sales manager that you should put. So I think the answer of soft skills is this: judge people wisely. Understand that people don't come with only skill sets; they come with emotions. So understand why they behave like that. If required, put them through some kind of, like for instance, this kind of soft skills. There are enough and more people offering them. These are not something that you learn by reading the books. I mean, negotiation tactics, etc. There'll be some book somewhere, but you don't become an expert. You don't become an expert in driving by just reading about driving. You just drive and drive and drive, and you become an expert. So similarly, you have to do it. So they do exercises for 2 days, 1.5 days, and actually explain to you where you make mistakes, etc. They're helpful. But then you have to practice it. At the end of the day, you just have got a license. So those kind of things will help. So try to develop your people. That's the second message. First message is judge your people wisely. Do this. And then third is take hard decisions. I mean, and some of the people that you join, this is one of the problems that I find, that people join and then they have struggled. They have been in the trenches right from the beginning. And one of the very successful companies, again, I'm not mentioning name because it's not fair. And he was recruiting somebody. And I asked him, why the hell are you recruiting him? So he said, oh, but so and so. I said, he's already doing the job. He said, no, but he can't handle this part of the job. So to handle that part, I'm recruiting somebody else. I said, the logical thing is to get rid of him. He said, yes, but we have grown up together. He has also been with me. How do I get rid of him? So not easy. I mean, perhaps I could relate to that. Not easy, but I'm just putting this thing down. That is how it is, because people do outlive their capabilities, usefulness. They don't grow, but encourage people to grow. I think that's another important thing. They encourage them to grow, tell them that you are not perfect, and ask them to grow, or encourage them to grow, support them to grow, so that the team grows as the company grows.
That's very well led, shared. Thanks for doing that. And the anecdotes you mentioned from your experience kind of makes it a lot more real. So thanks for doing that. And one of our listeners has very aptly put it right now, probably, that he finds the session very inspiring. And he's an entrepreneur, I believe, and for him as well, he puts it that entrepreneurship is like assembling a plane while you're falling down from the sky. So you take the decisions on the fly, and they have to be right because you have to survive.
It is very true. Sorry to interrupt. I really apologize, but I couldn't resist saying that it's a great journey, but it's something which will test the metal in you much more than a particular job or whatever. Sorry, you were saying something when I quite.
Not at all. Not at all. So I was just doing a quick time check. We are about 45 minutes into the session.
Yeah,
so we may want to wrap up in the next 5-7 minutes. We have one more question that's just come up. So I'll just open that out as well. So Mr. Anirudh is looking for any suggestions on authors or books or reading material that you'd recommend on management of innovation or entrepreneurship skills. He's quoted one of something like a Peter Drucker of the old times, which I'm personally not aware of. I'll go and check out.
But I can read it actually here. I can read it. Thanks. Yeah. So I can't really. There are a number of books. I think all of them are good up to a point. But I think they will probably expand whatever I have said and give a lot of examples of successful entrepreneurs. But you have to get to the basics. Innovation is little more difficult because my own belief is innovation is something which you need to develop a habit of doing. For instance, if you see something happening, ask yourself, can it be done better? Can it be done differently? It could be, you're having a cup of tea at the tapri and the way he's preparing the tea and handing it out. Can you do it differently? It could be, it doesn't have to be the big idea. It has to be any and every idea. If I may say so, it's a general comment and perhaps not fair, but our education system does not really encourage innovation. It basically expects you to master the knowledge, then create knowledge. So I think we need to, as a country, as a nation, we need to transition from that situation. There are innovation in teams. We have done a lot of work on how you innovate in a team. That's again a separate topic. I don't want to get into it. So I think because innovation in the context of an organization has to happen in an organization. How does it happen in an organization? Does the organization culture encourage innovation, or does it kill innovation as a matter of routine? Unknowingly, nobody kills it as a matter of this, but that is why many of the large organizations eventually atrophy because they stop innovating. So though that kind of work I have done, I could talk on that, not today, but I could talk on that. There is a lot of work which Stanford has an innovation center, and we had invited their head, or ex-head to be precise, who did a lot of sessions for us in Infosys because we wanted our people to get innovative. But if I may say that the last part is the entrepreneurship that we try to encourage in Infosys. The idea was that they will have people will come out with ideas and so on, and then they will be given special budgets and things like that to develop those ideas. And the process started in a big way. But the problem was that the people were never really under pressure, you see, because they were getting their fat salaries from Infosys, all the benefits. So it was like, if it succeeds, it succeeds. I think for an entrepreneur to succeed, he has to have a much bigger hunger. And part of that hunger is that if I fail, it will be not only a loss of face, but maybe a loss of actual material things. That gives that energy to push forward 18 hours, 20 hours a day. Yeah. So if that is missing, that is why many of these large companies are not able to become very innovative. Yeah, I think we have come to 50 minutes. So I know I'm skipping your
We have
call.
a couple of more questions, and
Sure.
I wouldn't feel nice if we don't address them. So
Please
maybe
go ahead.
very
I have
quickly.
all the time. I have all the time. Could you
So
please
there's
start
Mr.
with
Mohan who
manufacturing? You're addressing Mohan. Yeah, I think Mohan, the truth is that on manufacturing, I don't have really hands-on experience. Okay, but I think a lot of manufacturing, my own sense is they could learn a lot from IT industry. I don't think they try to develop people. I don't think at the very worker level. I don't think they just see them as workers. They just see them as resources. They have to encourage them to they have to be seen as individuals, and their own potential should be realized. They have to get a better emotional connect. I think the examples would probably better come from somebody who has spent a lot of time in manufacturing. I have lent to manufacturing companies and therefore have some idea, but no, I cannot really get into the hardcore manufacturing. I simply don't have that expertise. Yes, my expertise is in largely in IT and banking and so on. Yeah.
That's fair. And I'll say this will be the last one for the night before we're able to wrap up. So there's Mr. Mangesh
How do I
who
get to
wants
know
to connect.
connect with
How wants to know that how do you connect with right people in your field?
Well, in my field is what basically the sort of working with startups. I don't know. I mean, where are you located, Mangesh? Where are you located?
Uh,
All right, whatever it is. So I
I'll let
think
you know as he shares.
one of the things is, I mean, depends on the field that you are in, and it is best to try and get if it's a general chat that you want to have to begin with, because I think we are running short of time here. I'm happy to have a first general chat. I'm not angling for any business or whatever, but if you want to have a general chat, you're most welcome. I think Anvita has my telephone number, right, Anvita? So you can share it with him. Mumbai. He says Mumbai. Because I don't know the background. Because see, the point is there is no. I mean, there is entrepreneurship, which is a huge field. Okay, that is not very helpful. It has to be entrepreneurship in the field you're interested in. That probably makes sense because that is much more at the ground level. So I'll be happy to talk to you. You can get my number from Anvita, and we can set up a call and have a discussion. And then if I can point to the right direction, I will think. Offhand, I can't think because I don't know what field you're in and what exactly are you looking for.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, and I was going to end the session by sharing that, we'd love for Mr. Girish, your email ID, if that works for you, to be circulated to the larger group if they are comfortable sending you a short note on what kind of mentorship they may look from you, and depending on your interest, time, availability, if you can help out folks, that'll be excellent. But I do have a couple of more, and if that's okay, if you can address them in a minute, and then I'll share your email address for a longer chat
Yeah,
with folks on one if they're keen.
I think that's a good idea. Let's share the email thing. Yeah, well, what I think this is a very, very, very valid question. I don't know really the answer. I mean, I have seen two successful entrepreneurs. Let me give you examples. I asked one of them, you must be, I said, must be coming from a business family. He said, no. He said, my father is actually was an engineer with BHEL. He tried to start his own business twice, not once, twice. He said he failed both the times. And yet, he said, I insisted on becoming an entrepreneur. So, no family history, no nothing, just this. So, I think the answer is what does your inner voice tell you? There are, my own sense is that once you say, I want to earn enough, that enough is never enough, point number one. And then you become comfortable. And then you justify yourself, your prospects open up in the job you're doing, career, etc., etc. So it may be a little difficult to move out at that stage, but people have. I mean, people have started after retiring from army. I know of one person who started retired from army and then started and ran a very successful business. He was a colonel or brigadier or something like that. So anything is possible. And I have seen 20-year-olds jumping in without too much of a thought about it. So I think it's a level of energy. If at the age of 50, 55, you reckon you have got enough money, but you have lots of energy, what happens at the age of 45, 50 is you lose your energy. You get into the comfort zone and you say, let me continue as I am doing now. So that becomes a difficult thing. But if you can, well, why not? So on the other hand, if you jump in after graduation or after a couple of years, few years experience, then if it doesn't work out, you can still go back to a job. So it cuts both ways. And just let me add one more thing, that at least I know of a few big companies who actually valued entrepreneurs who didn't make it. Okay. Why? Because they saw the risk-taking ability. They saw that in 1 year of entrepreneurship journey, they would have learned more than what they would learn in 5 years. They have somebody who understands the logic behind how do you pay the employees in a way that the company remains, what should I say, sustainable and so on and so forth. So some of the pain points that people who have not really experienced much bring in, and which becomes a bit of a headache for senior management, they don't bring in. So, so I think the timing is really up to you. It's an individual choice. Nothing can be prescribed. I've seen both models work or not work.
Yeah, that's very well put, and I assure you this will be the last one for the night.
Sure.
We have Mr. Tushar who wants to get your comments on the role of non-software tech in Atmanirbhar Bharat.
I think Atmanirbhar Bharat is still, the concept is evolving, in my opinion. What does it mean? I mean, it's if it is just a question of cutting off from the world, which I hope is not the case, then it's a different world altogether. But if it's a question of becoming best in the world, then how do you become best in the world? So that Atmanirbhar is itself, and then there are supply chain issues. I mean, how do you manage? For instance, there is this big thing about API. I know about this industry because we used to lend to API companies in the bank. API was actually a flourishing business till 80s, I would say. In India, there were very good API manufacturers, and they would sell to the medical, the drug manufacturers and so on. But then China came in with pricing, which simply nobody could understand. Nobody could understand whether it was subsidy, exchange rate. Nobody could understand, and they just went under in 1990s. The business became unviable. So how do you manage that? I mean, you have then the entire semiconductor industry. I mean, 80 to 90% of the parts are made in India. Even if you take an Apple product, which is an American product, it is made in China, and so on and so forth. So how do where do you draw the line? These are very, very tricky questions. But I think if it means bringing in top-notch technology, then where do you bring that technology from? Or you have to develop it in-house. So I think at the moment, Atmanirbhar is still an evolving concept. Let us wait and see. But overall, going by the name itself, it would seem like, it should provide opportunities. But whether it provides opportunities for really cutting edge products, or like the earlier thing where we ended up just producing the Fiat and Ambassadors, which were 2 generations or 3 generations behind the most modern cars, is something to be seen yet. So I think it's still an evolving thing.
That's excellent. And we have a bunch of comments where folks have given their inputs that it was an inspiring session, and thanks for making the time. So on all their behalf and on behalf of the entire IIT Bombay Alumni Association and Mumbai chapter, I extend a heartfelt gratitude. Thank you so much for making the time, Mr. Girish. It was indeed a pleasure having you. Folks have appreciated the many anecdotes you've given, and this was definitely a very, very helpful session. Thanks so much for making the time.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you, all of you guys. Thank you. I enjoyed answering the questions also. Very interesting questions. Thank you.
Great.
Okay. Goodbye, folks. Good night.
Done.
Take care.
Just to end the session, if you can share.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. We'll circulate your email address in the comments section. If you can spell it out for folks who want to reach out to you, it may just help. Because I know how much mentorship means to entrepreneurs.
Yeah, okay. So here is the email address, Girish.Vaidya, I'll spell it out, Girish dot Vaidya, V for victory, A for apple, I for India, D for Delhi, Y for yellow, A for apple. Girish.Vaidya at gmail.com. Okay.
Super. Thanks so much, Mr. Girish. This was extremely helpful.
Thank you. Thanks, Anvita.
Take
Thanks for
care.
organizing
Good
it
night.
and conducting it so well. Goodbye. So can I say
It was a
log off
pleasure.
now?
That's correct. I'll end the
Can I
session
log
for
off
you.
now?
So, good night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Good
Bye.
night.